Hello, and welcome to another lesson from Level Up Mathematics. In today's lesson, we will be exploring horizontal and vertical lines. Let's look at an example of a horizontal and a vertical line before we begin to write equations for those lines. So in the first problem, we have a horizontal line with 3 points, points A, B, and C, and they've asked us to find the coordinates of point A, point B, and point C. So for point A, we would have to go to the left 3, and then down 2. So the coordinates would be -3, comma, -2. To get to point B, we would not go left or right, so that's 0, and then we'd go down 2 for our second coordinate. C, we would have to go to the right, so that would be +4, and down 2, so -2. Now, what I want you to notice about all the y values on this horizontal line is that all the y values are -2. And that leads us to the second question. Write an equation to describe the line above and then state the slope of the line. So our equation would simply be y equals -2. And our slope, because it's a horizontal line, would be 0. All right, in our next example, we have a vertical line with 3 points, points A, B, and C. To get to point A, we would have to go to the right 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, and up 5. So 3, comma 5. To get to B, we would go right 3 and up 0. And to get to C, we would go right 3 and down 1, 2, 3, 4. So down -4. Now, in this vertical line, I want you to notice it is the x value that's remaining the same. So our equation would be x equals +3, and our slope would be undefined. All right, example 1. Graph each line described and then write an equation to describe the line. So in problem A, it wants us to graph a vertical line that passes through the point 2, comma, -4. So the first thing we'll do is we'll plot our point they gave us, 2, -4. And then they want us to draw a vertical line through that point. Now, notice that the only axis this blue line touched was the x-axis, and it touched it at x equals 2. So our equation would simply be x equals 2. And you can notice that's the first number of your ordered pair. Okay. Problem B, we're going to draw a horizontal line that passes through the point 0, -1. So we'll plot our point first, 0, -1, and then we'll draw a horizontal line through that point. Now, notice in this line, trying to get that straight, in this line, it only touches the y-axis. So my equation would be y equals -1. All right, pause the video and try problem C on your own. All right, welcome back. Let's see how you did. You were supposed to plot the point -4, 0, and then draw a vertical line through it, and then write the equation of that vertical line, which would be x equals -4. All right, example 2. Graph each equation and then state the slope of the line. So in problem A, our equation is y equals 2.5. So I want to go on the y-axis and put a dot at 2.5. That would be halfway between the 2 and the 3. And I also want you to notice that in the equation, there's no x. So this line that I'm about to draw cannot touch the x. And the only way that can happen is if that line is horizontal. And the slope of all horizontal lines is 0. All right, in problem B, we have the vertical line, x equals -9/2, which is equivalent to x equals -4.5. So on the x-axis, I'm going to go left 4.5. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and a little more. Now, notice in this equation, there's no y. So this line can never touch the y-axis, which means it is vertical. And the slope of a vertical line is undefined. Now in problem C, we have 3 times y is equal to -6. In order to graph this, I have to get the y by itself. So I'll divide both sides by 3, and that would give me y equals -2. So I want to go on the y-axis to -2, and then draw a horizontal line. Right there. And the slope of a horizontal line is 0. Now, in example 3, it says graph the line y equals 3 and the line y equals 3x, and then state their domain and range. Compare and contrast the two linear functions. So if I want to graph y equals 3, here's my y-axis. Y is equal to 3 would be 1, 2, 3. Notice in y equals 3, there's no x. So that means it can never touch the x. So that would be a horizontal line. Now, for the domain, it goes to the left to -infinity, and to the right, it goes to +infinity. So that would be all real numbers. But on the range, there's only one y value in this. Every single y value on this line is equal to 3. So the range is simply the number 3. That's the only thing y can equal on that line. Now, for the graph of y equals 3x, here we have an x and a y. So what I want you to notice is that our slope would be 3 and our y-intercept would be 0, because this is literally y equals 3x plus 0. So if I begin at the 0 and then go up 3 and right 1, I would get a slanted line. Looks something like this. Now this line goes to the left to -infinity and to the right to +infinity. So the domain is all real numbers. It also goes down to -infinity and up to +infinity. So the range is also all real numbers. Now let's compare and contrast. So I'm going to say y equals 3 and y equals 3x are similar because they are both linear functions with a domain of all real numbers and they are different because the y values of y equals 3 remain constant, whereas the y values of y equals 3x continue to increase as the value of x increases. All right, example 4. Graph each line described and then write an equation to describe the line and state its slope. So in problem A, it wants us to graph a line that is parallel to the x-axis and passes through the point 3, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. So here's our point. Here's the x-axis. I want my line to be parallel, so it needs to be running like a railroad track. So that means if it's parallel to the x-axis, it's going to have to be a horizontal line. So my equation for a horizontal line always starts with y equals, and here y equals 2 has a slope of 0. All right, problem B. This time they want us to draw a line that is perpendicular to the x-axis and passes through -2, 4. So -2, 4 be right here. Here's our x-axis. Now, if I draw a horizontal line, it'll be parallel to the x-axis, but we want to be perpendicular to the x-axis. So this time my equation would be x equals -2, and my slope would be undefined. All right, pause the video and try problem C on your own. All right, welcome back. We are to draw a line that's parallel to the y-axis. So here's the y-axis, and passes through the point 4, 0. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 0. And we want to be parallel to the y-axis, which means it would look like this, vertical. So the equation would be x equals 4, and the slope would be undefined. All right, example 5. Answer the questions below. You can use the grid to help you answer the questions. So in problem A, it says, what is the slope for the line y equals 4? So let's go on our y-axis to 1, 2, 3, 4. Now, y equals 4, there's no x, so it cannot touch the x-axis, which means it must look like this. And the slope of that line would be 0 because it's horizontal. All right. Next question. What is the slope of the line x equals 0? So let me go on the x-axis. And x equals 0 would be a vertical line. And so that would be an undefined slope. All right. What is the slope of the line y equals -5x? Now, this line is in slope-intercept form, so our slope is -5. We don't even need to graph that one. Problem C. The line represented by the equation x equals 4 is parallel to which axis? So x equals 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, would look like this. And it would be parallel to the y-axis. All right, problem D. The line represented by y equals -1 is parallel to which axis? So here's y equals -1. There's our y-axis. There's -1. Here's the line y equals -1. And it would be parallel to the x-axis. Write an equation to describe the x-axis. So here's our x-axis. Now it's a horizontal line, so it must start with y equals, and it touches at 0. Now, if that's hard to understand, let me draw a few points here. This would be -2, 0. This would be the point 2, 0. This would be the point 5, 0. Notice that on that line, every y value is equal to 0. That's why the equation is y equals 0. All right, now we want to write an equation to describe the y-axis. So here's the y-axis. Before I write the equation, I'm going to list some points here. This would be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This would be the point 0, 1. This would be the point 0, -3. All right, notice what they all have in common. What they all have in common is that their x value is equal to 0. And that concludes today's lesson on horizontal and vertical lines.